Further ado, we are so lucky to have Jennifer Lieman with us today. With over 20 years of experience in the public sector, Jennifer has had titles such as electrician, lean black belt, scrum master, diversity and inclusion manager, master of public administration, and project manager. Her passion is her own continuous failing, learning, helping others, and using her education, skills, and experience to create change. Jennifer hopes to leverage her passion and strength to help organizations and others reach their goals and achieve something that is bigger than ourselves. Take it away, Jennifer.
Welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to share and learn today. Let's see if my first learning will be sharing my screen again. Let's see if I do this good. And if I can just get a quick tech check just to make sure I am in fact sharing the PowerPoint presentation view and not the notes.
Yeah, that's great. Allie, great.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you again. Quick things to add in addition to what was already provided. This session is designed for experiential learning and a lot of interaction. So today you can expect a lot of learning by doing in this next hour. As mentioned, there are handouts to help with learning available in the chat. In case you didn't have time to download anything or print anything out, no problem. I'm going to provide a prompt as we get to the exercises, and feel free now just to grab your favorite writing material, your e-capturing tool, whatever it is that you like to use to capture items. You are going to be using them during this next hour. All right, let's get to learning. So the topic of change management can be very broad. To help tailor to the material to our audience today, I wanted to do a quick check-in and see what you were most interested in. This way we could tailor the material to our people who are present today. So in a moment, it looks like it's already up. There is a poll. It's open. You'll be invited to share what you're interested from the choices that are on the slide. And the chat will be temporarily enabled as well. So in the case that you chose other, please tell me a little bit more about what you would like to see if you did choose other, and if you could post that in the chat. All right, so let's see, the poll is available. And it looks like it's open for voting. All right, so far it looks like the audience is interested in change management best practices and lessons learned. We'll have plenty of stories about those, seeing how we can use the tools. As mentioned, hands-on and experiential learning, so you're going to get practice today. And let's keep it open for how about 15 more seconds, and then close it out. And I'm going to do a quick, if I could get assistance with the chat check, that way I don't tempt technology failing on me. If there was just anything in the chat I should be aware of.
Hi, Jennifer, it's Elisa here. It looks like I actually made a mistake and didn't keep the poll open long enough. So if chat is still open, I can reshare the results if anyone wants to pop anything into the chat right now.
No problem. I think I got enough information to move forward. So we're going to do that next. And thank you all. You've fulfilled your first learning by doing exercise. So a little bit before we get into change specifically. So successful initiative deployments happen when people bridge initiative management and change management. For this next hour, an initiative can be any product, service, act, law, or strategy an organization is trying to implement. Initiative management is the process to help do the right things to get that initiative realized. That way we have something tangible to deploy. Change management is the process to help do the right things to help get this initiative adopted or used. So a couple of examples of initiative management are on the left. There are things that you might see in project management, like scope, budgets. Even in our lean initiatives, we see our schedules, our timelines, our milestones. In Agile, we might see requirements. In lean, we might see business processes. And if we need to purchase something or procure, we're going to see contracts. So these are examples of artifacts that we see in initiative management. For change management, some things we might see are communication plans, training plans, media or field-facing websites, coaching plans, and things like change assessments. Although I have these two items in two different columns and categories, they're not exclusive from each other. One item is dependent on the other, and you cannot have one without the other. But when you have these two things and you bridge them together, you have the successful deployment, and that's when your business results happen. All right, on to change. So this workshop focus is on change management. How do we help do those right things to get the initiative adopted? The objective is assisting behavioral change. In this picture, we see a range of behavioral steps that people might go through. At the most basic step is at the bottom. And as we go higher up on the steps, the behavioral steps progress. So at that very bottom basic level, people need to be conscious that there is something to do and show behaviors that reflect they have that understanding. After they've met that basic level of consciousness and exhibit those behaviors, then at that point, they're able to progress to the next steps. Caution, these steps only help indicate where a person is, but they do not diagnose why. So as we look at those behavioral steps, that basic thing, I'm conscious that there is something to do, at a minimum, that is one step we want to hit. There's another step where we can see a person reaching for the stars and has an asterisk on it, and it said, yes, I did it. That's another key step of behavioral change that we want to see. Now, it's all those things in between that are the things that we help assist. So the I won't do it after someone is conscious that there is something to do, they have the autonomy, they have the right to make this decision of whether they do it or not. And that's the next step that they'll reach. If they choose to proceed and do it, maybe the next step that they'll hit is, well, I can't do it. Maybe there's a barrier to preventing them from doing something. After that, it could be, well, okay, I want to do it. After that is, how do I do it? That might be behavior you'll see. After that, I'll try to do it. They want to make the attempt. After that, I can do it. I see I've maybe had some success. I know I can be successful at it. I will do it. I'm going to make that next step. I'm going to make the attempt to do it. Till they reach that next step. Yes, I did it. And you can see that behavioral change there. Now, after that, there's some bonus steps. I'll continue to do it. Yes, I did it once, but I'm going to keep doing it again and again. And that super bonus level is, I'm going to share this with others. Not only have I done it, not only do I continue to do it, but I'm going to share with others how it's affected me and how it's so great. And that is a great thing to achieve. For change management, know that I'll share it with others is a great step to achieve, but at a minimum, you're looking for that I'm conscious that there is something to do, and that yes, I did it step, looking to achieve that. All right. So how do we do that? When starting with the change initiative or any initiative at all, you may not have a lot of information to gauge where your stakeholders are in relation to those steps. How do you know where to start? So for me, I start with 4 key change focus areas to invest in, and they're going to be referred to as enablers on this slide, and they're underlined. Examples of what these enablers look like in practice, the methods are provided below each enabler. So the first enabler is communication. Communication changes awareness, that first basic step. That's why I start with that one. Some example of methods to enable are kickoff meetings, office hour sessions, and leadership presentations. The next enabler is education. Education changes knowledge. Maybe some methods examples are webinars, videos or tutorials, person-to-person sessions. The next example or the next enabler is training. Training changes skill and ability. So examples of methods could be train the trainer sessions, where you're specifically looking at how to train other people so they have the ability to do something. Scenarios for people to practice. In an IT environment or Agile, maybe a sandbox, a place where people can test out an IT solution. And then the last is development. This enabler changes attitudes and hearts. They could be testimonials. There's two acronyms there. That's probably the only acronyms you see today, but they're still too long to type out. So the what's in it for me, which people often refer to in change management, but also because we do work in public service and I have worked with nonprofits and tribes, what's in it for my purpose? Sometimes it's not just about me. What's in it for my community? What's in it for my customer, my client, my purpose, the next generations coming forward, whatever that purpose is, tying into that. And then the last is prototypes and experiences. Can they touch it? Can they play with it? Can they do something with it? I mean, if you can get them involved early on, that's also a development experience as well. All right. So looking at enabling behaviors, I mean, there's no one right answer. Once you are able to get that additional experience or maybe get feedback from your stakeholders, choose what works for that person at that time, wherever they're at. So I touched on communication. I tied communication to that first basic level. I'm conscious there is something to do. Maybe for different people, wherever they're at, what step they're at, they need a different enabler to move them to that next step. For that person who is at that I won't do it, maybe they need some development opportunities. Maybe for that person who is at that how do I do it, maybe they could use education. And maybe for that person who is at that I'll try to do it, maybe those training sessions, things like that. If you're at that advanced level where someone is at that, yes, I did it and I'll continue to do that, maybe a bonus thing to do is having that person lead the train the trainer session. That way they're able to continue doing it and they're sharing it with others as well. So a way to leverage those enablers. All right. So earlier I mentioned that this workshop is experiential learning, learn by doing. So here is our first exercise. It's going to be used with handout number 1 and with this slide. If there's no handout, it's no problem. Grab that e-capture tool that you use or that scrap piece of paper or whatever it is that you use to capture information and learn. And we're going to go into our first exercise. So with this exercise, what I'm going to ask you to do is please read the objectives from the enabler choice. Review which enabler best matches that objective. In the next slide, we're going to check our answers in the next step. So for an example, for this top objective, I want people to understand why it is important to come to the Lean conference. Out of those 4 enabler choices, which one do you think matches best? So if you think it's communication, you would write communication or document communication in that space, and then so on. There's only one answer for each objective. There's a hint. If there's no questions, I think I've got it. I'll give you, how about 1 minute to populate your answers? And it looks like 60 seconds plus some change has gone by. So let's check our answers. All right, so go ahead and check your answers. You can compare them with what's on the slide. Were your answers the same? Were they different? Please post your result in the chat. Same, same. Okay, so I see a lot of same. I got. So when I put this exercise together, this is what I was thinking in my mind, you know, based on the definitions and the structure that was provided earlier, this is how I saw each thing going. Now, if you got something different, what I say is if it works for you, it works for you. Just make sure that as you go forward and share with others, just make sure you're using a constant structure so everybody goes forward with the same understanding. All right, let's move forward. Oh, I was so eager to move forward because I'm so worried about time. Any questions I should stop and check for before proceeding?
Yeah, hi Jennifer. You have a couple questions in the Q&A box.
Okay.
Marty is wondering, what do you recommend when leadership are not supportive?
Ooh. Is it okay, Marty, if I hold on to that one for these successes and setbacks? Because I happen to have an example of that one.
I have a feeling the second question may be the same. Marty says yes.
Okay.
I have a feeling the second question might be along the same lines. Heidi wants to know how you can keep change management moving all the way to the top of the staircase so you don't start to regress. Heidi says, I've seen people go from I'll try to do it to I won't do it because they didn't get the right support.
Fantastic. I'm not sure if you already previewed the slides, but I happen to have a slide on that one. So I'm going to hold on to that one as well for that portion. There's a slide for it. I got you.
Awesome. And that's it. So we can move on.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So earlier I talked about those first 4 key enablers. Like if I have no information about anything, those are just the 4 that I go to. I've added 4 additional enablers and methods on here. And these are ones I've added because maybe I've seen others experience success with them. Maybe I've experienced success with them. Or maybe it's because I experienced a setback because I didn't use them. A little bit of life lesson there. So there's 4 additional enablers and methods on here. Tools needed. These could be physical tools if maybe you have something that you're doing in a construction environment, like physical tools. Do they have the wrench to be able to do the job? In an online environment, maybe it's login access. You know, if they can't log into an IT solution, there's no way that they're going to be able to use it. If it's another new IT solution, maybe it's a new tracking system. Do they have all the hardware to be able to get training on the system? So just making sure that they realistically have the tools needed to do the job, whether they're physical tools or whether they're online tools. Processes and instructions, business processes, reference guides. Sometimes we'll deploy an IT solution but forget about how it impacted the business. So yeah, I can go online and do something, but how does that tie with my business flow as well? So just making sure that you have those things laid out for them. And then the last 2 are support and time. Providing support for people to move up those stairs. Maybe it's providing a safe to fail environment. Maybe they're scared of failing. I don't even want to try to do something if I have this fear of failure, or maybe I don't have a psychologically safe environment to fail. So it's better to not do it at all than to try it and fail in some cultures. And then just offering that support, even just checking it in and not waiting for them to ask you. So those are some things that are may or may not have failed on. And then time, 6 times, 6 ways is a learning tool that I use when it comes to learning something and retaining the information, whether it's education or skills. You need to practice it 6 times, 6 different ways in a short period of time to be able to really retain the information. So making sure you offer those things in that period of time. And then the last is just the time to adopt. For me, even personally, you know, my husband may tell me something and maybe in that minute, I'm just not going to agree with it for whatever reason, maybe our relationship, but maybe that next day, maybe if I've had time to sleep on it, maybe that time to think about it or be in a different environment for me to be able to soak it in will give me time to maybe change my heart and my mind about how I thought about something. So time to adopt something as well, whether it's time to change your feeling about it, maybe it's the time to practice it and really develop the skills to successfully deploy as well. So those are some additional change enablers and methods I would offer. All right, let's get to those Q&A questions. Let's see. So the second one, how can you keep change management moving all the way to the top of the behavioral change staircase? If you don't, so you don't start to regress and go back down the stairs. Perfect. I'm totally glad you use that scenario because that is the one I think I've used here too. So in the top left corner of the slide, you see a person. Don't know where they're going. They could be going up, they could be going down, they could be going nowhere. So for Heidi, what I'm going to offer, just for your example, is checking back in with them, you know, a caution for the exact reason that you said. Just because you moved someone up doesn't mean they're not regressing back down, or they may not be going anywhere. I'm just going to stay on how do you do it, and that's it. I'm not going to move up or I'm not going to move down. I'm just safe at this place. So I think what I would offer is checking back in, using that support enabler. Hey, I've seen, you know, last time we spoke, you know, we set you up with the tools, you were going to go and try this out, and I've seen that you haven't tried it out yet. Can you tell me what's going on? And maybe that's a place to start. All right. All right. All right. I was seeing what questions were left. All right. And then the next example is an elevator, because not all of us use stairs or use an escalator. But for the caution on this slide is the same thing, you know, remembering where people are at. They could be going up, they could be going down, but also remembering that just because you gave the same information to 2 groups of people or 2 different people still doesn't mean they're at the same place. You know, you need to remember to check in with those stakeholder groups. Maybe those are different groups of people, or maybe with those respective individuals, especially if they're in those key leadership positions, if they're in control of funding, if they're in a position of influence where they might be sharing with others that they shouldn't do it, those key positional things, making sure and checking in with them as well if they're in those key roles. So caution number 2, just because you put the same information out to the same groups of people still doesn't mean they're at the same level. You need to check in and see where they're at and see how to help them to that next step. I just checked the Q&A. The hard questions are coming today. So okay, I'll save this one. It says it's a post-discussion question, so I'll hold on to it. Oh, and then another comment I see in the Q&A on going up the steps. Don't you sometimes need to repeat steps before continuing onward? Absolutely. Depending on what it is that you've launched, if it's maybe an education that you've offered, and if someone still hasn't gotten the knowledge sunk in, then you definitely have to repeat it again, especially skills things. You know, I'd go to that 6 times 6 ways. Definitely need to do things more than once. I have a lessons learned for communications, you know, but I'll just drop it here too. You can't communicate something just once. You know, that's going to go with that 6 times 6 different ways as well. Well, you know, I sent you an email, you know, a year ago. We're deploying now. Don't you remember? definitely something I've seen. So absolutely, more than once, repeat, repeat, repeat. Enough for the people that you can see that change. If it's enough for them, that's when you know you've hit it. So again, this is an experiential learning hour. We are going to learn by doing. Feel free to use handout number 2 if you've had a chance to download it or if you've had a chance to print it. And again, if you haven't had the chance to print it, no handout, no problem. Again, grab your nearest writing material or e-capturing material, and we are going to go forward with this next exercise. So for this next exercise, what I'm going to ask you to do is reflect on an initiative that you are currently working or have worked in the past. I want you to think about what is the name of that project or that initiative. Go ahead and capture that. If it is an initiative that you are currently working, think about a team member or a stakeholder, and think about where they are currently located. What step are they located? Think about where you would like them to be next. Where do you want to lead them to next, or where should they be going next? After thinking about that step, think about which enabler would you use? Would it be communication? Would it be education, training, development? Which method would you use? Would you use a kickoff? Would you use a training? Would you use a tutorial? And then after that, how would their behavior change, or what type of feedback would you look for to know that they have reached that level? And so those are the steps. If it's a current initiative, if it's one that's in the past, we're going to go through the same steps. It's just going to be reflection and thinking about past tense. So what was the step that team member was located? Where did you want them to lead next? Which enabler did you use to get them there? Or which method did you use? And how did you know, what did you see that led you to believe that their behavior changed? Or what type of feedback did you look for to let them know that that had occurred? And then if you feel to do so, please post your responses in the chat. And I'll give you 1 minute. All right, it looks like our minute is up. So before we move on to the end of that exercise, I wanted to offer another best practice or something lessons learned. Make sure you document the plan. You went through all that effort to reach out to stakeholders or to do analysis and think about what it is that you did or capture those lessons learned. Make sure to document those things for a couple of reasons. One, you're able to share that information with other people so they can be on board with the direction that you're going with your initiative and why. My favorite reason is in case you win the lotto and you are off that initiative or you retire, you leave something to the next person who's going to come and be your successor as well. All right. So here is something that I put together. Just an example how everything can look put together. I use the 4 key ones: development, training, education, and development. But I just went through one by line and just went through the steps. You know, what's the objective I want people to meet? And I added the next step on there of the behavior that it tied to. I put the enabler that I thought I would use, the method, and then I put feedback. You know, what am I going to look for to know that this change is occurring? If it's something that I can't talk to people and see them, if I can't see them say, hey, I love it, or I want to do it, well, what other thing can I look for as well? So in this case, I want people to understand why it is important to come to the Lean conference. The enabler I used was development, and maybe a method is testimonials. Get other people to share their experiences, what they got out of it, and share that with other people. And how would we see that? Maybe our social media postings. That's the example that I chose. Yeah. And there's examples for each of those. This is also just a real simple template. I've been in organizations where I was the black belt, I was the green belt, and I was the change manager. Sometimes you only have so much capacity. So this is just a real quick example of how you can document the plan in a real simple tool. So a little bit fancier tool. I also work with the Veterans Health Administration, and they've allowed me the opportunity to share one of the tools that they use. So for Veterans Health Administration, I use the acronym VHA for short. And VHA, they use ProSci and the ADKAR method. So for the steps that they go through, it's called ADKAR, and ADKAR is an acronym for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So you can see those enablers on top, and then you can see what it looks like to achieve those. Awareness of the need for change, desire to support the change, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, those things that they do to sustain the change. So the wording is a little bit different, but you can still kind of see how it's a progression. You still want people to exhibit behaviors, and there's things that you need to do to be able to help them reach those levels. I think also it helps with the question about what we could do with people and those check-ins. So in this example here for VHA, what we do is we have these stakeholder assessments. Instead of just maybe looking at maybe one person, we look at our stakeholder groups or segments. So we might list those there. And so in this example, our application end users, this is going to be an IT example, we'll put those stakeholder groups. Then we'll go and we'll look at for each of those areas, we'll kind of rate them between 1 and 5. Where are they at? If they are not at that green level where they want them to be, you'll see some comments. We'll either see the evidence that shows that they are at a certain level, or we can also add the comments on the things that we are going to do to help them up those levels too. So I love the tool. It's another one of those things that you can use it how you need to use it. It's very simple. So, and I like the 1 through 5. I like to measure things. But also, you know, it ties back to the question someone asked, you know, more than once. You can see in this example, we did 3 assessments. So it just wasn't one thing we did once a year. On this one, we did it like every 3 months, and there was a reason for it. So use it for how you need to use it. All right. So those successes and setbacks. I'm going to go through a lean example, an agile example, and a diversity and inclusion example. And I'm going to remember to go back to these Q&As and chats. If I miss anything, please let me know, because these should cover some of these questions in here. All right, so the first one from the Q&A, what do you recommend when leadership are not supportive? So I'm not sure if this is the same reason why leadership is not supportive in your scenario, but for a real life scenario with me, this did happen, and this was in a lean example. I had an initiative that had a lean champion that couldn't fully support their role as a champion. After a little bit of conversation with them, it wasn't a case of that I won't do it. And we knew that because they had already accepted their role as a lean champion. After some discussion, there was a little bit of, I can't do it. A little bit of, I want to do it. And how do I do it as well? So some successes and setbacks. Success in this scenario is the agency that I worked for at the time, they openly supported lean. So it wasn't a matter of me just trying to be like, hey, let's just do this. It was the whole agency, as a community, this was how we did business. So that was great to see, they had their peers, this champion's peers would help provide support to get them to support lean as well. Another success was that the agency provided lean education. So we talked about one of those enablers, which was education, changing that knowledge. And they provided champion workshops, so specifically for our champions, how to be a lean champion, a little bit of history of lean, the tools that we use, and what they needed to do at their level. So that was definitely super helpful and a success. So some setbacks. The champion did not have the experience before. He didn't have that development. They had not participated in an event before. And the champion had not sponsored an event before. So looking at our structure, looking at that training and development, those were some things that may have been missing. And then the last, the champion took a lean tour at an outside company agency and saw something that resonated with them. So definitely in the development category, changing minds and hearts, and was definitely a success. In this example, our agency provided tours to outside industry. One of the companies that they went to was a woodworking company. It's just so happened to be that this champion was into woodworking, was a carpenter, like redid their cabinets. And so when they went and they saw that this woodworking industry was using lean, like that was just enough for that person. So that was definitely a success as well, an example of using that development. All right. So I think just to end with that, and I also want to add, like, this isn't just one champion like that experienced all these, like it's a compilation of personas. It's not just one champion that you'll experience, but I would just say, if you have a lean champion or an executive that is key, that we need their support, use your network, use their peers, check in with them, and challenge your assumptions. Sometimes I'm gonna say I did it, but maybe, sometimes I'll just be like, oh, they just don't want to do it, but after you talk to them, you kind of see, you understand why. Where are they at? Maybe they can't do it. Maybe they want to, they just don't know how, and really seeing what is it that they need to go to that next step. All right, and I hope I answered that. Let's see. Okay, and I think I'm going to hold on to the last two. We're a couple slides away. All right, scenario number 2, an agile scenario. People are not using an application that has launched. Who has ever experienced that? So some successes. The project team had communicated that the application was launched, so they did that communication. However, the setback, the launch was communicated once 6 months prior to when it was launched. So you kind of see the behavior was, well, we told them, well, yeah, but we told them 6 months ago. So remember that 6 times 6 ways, remember that time enabler. We need to make sure, do it recent, do it frequent as well, and in proximity to when someone's going to use something. Success, the project team offered webinar trainings so users could take the training when it was convenient, convenient for them. Sometimes as the project lead or someone who delivers training, I'm thinking about my own schedule, like I only have so much capacity. So in this case, they're able to offer an on-demand webinar and offer also some hands-on training scenarios as well. So not only changing the education, but offering training opportunities so they can practice their ability and doing it when it was convenient for the user, not just convenient for me. So some setbacks. The project team did not adjust their change methods when they saw low usage. So they only used one method and they were just going to keep using that. So sometimes, that method just may not work for their learning style, may not work for their time, and for whatever reasons. Sometimes we need to change methods to tailor to the user to help them move up the step that they need to move to. And then last, the project did not update the business processes as they were changed. So this one I put an asterisk on it because at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about how processes are also part of initiative management. Like we need to look at our workflows, we need to look at our business processes. So sometimes people don't see it as a change problem, like that's a project or initiative problem. But in this case, again, one affects the other. And if you didn't give someone a business process to follow, that's going to tie into our change management. Well, I can't do it because it doesn't work, or I don't know how it works next. So that was also a setback. All right, diversity and inclusion example. So people are not supporting diversity and inclusion efforts. So for this one, looking at the steps that people were at, thinking back and reflecting, different people were at different steps. One person just wasn't conscious that there was something to do. Like, I didn't even know this was a thing. Some people had different beliefs. I won't do it. It's not in alignment with my values. Another person, I can't do it. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. How do I support this in this kind of environment? And you can see their progression to I want to do it, and then how do I do it? So some setbacks. People did not know why diversity inclusion was important to the business. Like, that's a soft thing. That's a diversity inclusion thing. Why do I need to do that for business? So some successes, sharing why it was important to the business, providing things like attrition data, retirement projections, in which now it's kind of easier to see that things because we're feeling it. We have that development, we're experiencing it, but this was prior to the Great Resignation. So, but still sharing why it's important. We've been able to look outward. Setbacks, people had some misconceptions or different understandings of the same terms. So using that education enabler, let's talk about what these definitions are, so we're all on the same understanding when we talk about these different things. Successes, providing diversity and inclusion training aligned to the organization goals. Just not providing diversity and inclusion training for the sake of diversity and inclusion training, tying it to the bottom line. Example, bias training in interviewing. Definitely you can see how that ties to the bottom line. We need to bring people in here. We need to make sure we have the broadest pool. If we have biases, that's preventing that from happening. So kind of easy to see that one. And then people did not know how to support diversity and inclusion. And this one was pretty broad for different reasons. So just sharing how to be an advocate for people that are different than you, acknowledging that you have power in different roles, and it's not about having that power, it's about how you're using it and how you're lifting others up, and remembering to think about people that may not have a voice, kind of things like that, showing people how they could be an advocate. All right. Let's see. All right. Last slide, your last exercise of the day and the last slide. So connections, learning, questions, and action. Again, there's a handout for this one, handout number 3. And again, no handout, no problem. Feel free to grab that blank piece of paper, your e-capturing material, whatever it is that you would like to use. So your final exercise. What was shown that was similar to what you already knew? What was shown that was different? What are some of your questions? And how do you plan to use this information? I will give you I'll give you 2 minutes. That's a lot of questions. I'll give you 2 minutes to reflect and capture your answers. And then feel free to post any additional questions in the Q&A. And then also, if we can open up the chat, if you could also share how you plan to use this information, especially our theme, results happen when we're together. So a great way to knowledge share and give others ideas on how they can use it as well. And your 2 minutes begins now. All right, we still have time to get to as many questions as we can. If you're still reflecting on those questions, no problem. Take the time that you need to. While you're doing that, I'm going to start going through the Q&A. And before I get through the Q&A, I might answer some of the questions in there too. But even the questions that I asked at the end, they were intentional. So what was shown that was similar to what you already knew? This example is just good for connections and benchmarking and those proof of concepts, those quick wins to maybe show those non-believers like, well, they don't do this anywhere else. Like, no, they do this everywhere. I heard Jennifer say it. I saw this used in the VHA. I saw people in the chat talking about how they use it. So, we're not the only people to use it. And here's all these other examples. So kind of just like for the champion, they needed that, in my example, they needed that woodworking example. So maybe we can find examples that resonate with people and what they are interested in. What was shown that was different, going back to not getting stuck on that same tool or same method. Here's something that new you can use for your toolbox. So what are some of your questions? Just return on investment for anybody that may have been a naysayer for you coming to this conference or investing the time. Hey, not only did I hear from other people, not only did I get benchmarking information, but I also got some of my own questions answered as well. So you got to change your education as well. And then how do you plan to use this information? That's also return on investment. You can take that back to whoever sponsored you for coming or investing in you today and being like, hey, thank you for this time. Here's how I plan to use it. Not only are you sharing with others, but you're also providing return on investment for them to invest in you again later. So all those were asked for a reason. All right, let's look at, start with the Q&A.
You've got some really good questions in here. How can we best help folks at different levels simultaneously? Sometimes early adopters become frustrated with those who are a step or two behind them in adoption. even when folks are still engaged in the change process? Do you have any tips or things to keep in mind?
Let's see, some things at the top of my head to help people at different levels. Those people that are already like advanced and like I'm ready to do the next thing, leverage those people to help share, provide the testimonials, coach and train others, especially if you're a team of one. Hey, thank you. Oh, thank you, Joe or Pat. Thank you so much for being engaged, for being an early adopter. Here's how we can really help use your expertise and support in this, and maybe see if they're open to doing that. One, it'll keep them using the tool or keep performing the initiative. One, if that is part of their purpose, if they do like helping others, you get to feed their purpose. And it's that extra bonus level, like you get them sharing their information with others, and it's peers talking to peers and not someone from this other level trying to push something down on someone else. I think, does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another question folks had, can you give some examples of successful ways to check in with a project team moving up the staircase in the remote or hybrid workplace? Are there any barriers from your experience that they should watch out for?
Yes, there are barriers in a hybrid workplace. So I think some things that I've seen used are those office hours. For office hours in the VHA, they're like scheduled times for people to come in, hear about new information, share their concerns. So that could be one forum you could do that. Another way you could check in is asking people for feedback on how something is working. If you're asking for feedback and they don't have any to give you because they haven't used the tool or they haven't deployed the initiative, that's feedback, and that helps you gauge where they're at. They're either at, they didn't know something was supposed to be done, which I'm going to say if you're there checking up on them, they should have known. So they just might be at, I won't do it or I can't do it. And then you can start having that conversation with them. Hey, I've noticed you haven't used the application, or hey, I've noticed we haven't seen an increase in usage in this region. Is there anything I can do to help that? Or can you provide any feedback on what we can do? Because maybe there's something wrong. Maybe it's not a good tool. So what kind of feedback can we get to make it a better tool that you will use it? So.
Awesome. It looks like we have time for one more question. And there are a couple along the same lines about how to positively integrate change culture with employees who don't believe in the new culture. Many have worked in the same system for years, and transitioning them to a new culture is difficult because buy-in is resistant to those who have been in the system for a long time.
So that one can be a couple of different ways, and a lot is going to depend on the person, on what level they're at. I had a quick example. At one place I worked for, everything was still very paper documentation based. We're trying to move people to this IT solution and get people to move online. But very paper culture, like I don't want to use an IT solution. What happens if something happens to the server and I don't have this piece of paper? I mean, and people have that concern. So I think it's for those people, it just might take a lot of extra investment. If they're not key personnel, like if they're not maybe stopping funding, it may be good to invest in those early adopters or their peers around them. That way, if you can help change their peers can help coach them and help you change the culture. For some people, especially if there's not if they haven't found their reason to change, if there's not a monetary motivation, I mean, if there's not something to motivate them, and if there's nothing to help promote the change, they just may not change. And so that may be a case as well. If those are key people for your initiative, if those are your champion, in that case, it may be an issue where we need to swap someone out as well. So for that question, it's all going to depend on the person and where they're at. But sometimes it just might be timing. So in the example about the paper, that was pre-COVID. And as COVID happened, we saw their adoption change, their attitude changed, their heart changed, and they went to use the IT solution. So sometimes it's just timing, but that person did come around.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer. This has been a great session. I know I learned a lot. Really appreciate you doing this for us. And thank you everyone for being here and joining us.